Okay, we're learning the laws of kibbut Ema. We'll continue from there today and then move on to the discussion about standing up for older people. Okay, we are at Lamed Aleph and Beis 31b. Oh, but we're about halfway through the wide lines toward the bottom of the page. Tana Rabbanon. We've got 7 lines in the bottom of the page. Chacham, a scholar, Shana Shem Aviv Shem Rabbi. He changes the name of his father or his rabbi. Turgaman Einim Shana Leshem Aviv Leshem Rabbi. So we spoke about the Turgaman in the past. The Turgaman was somebody who had a very, very loud voice. I don't know if it was loud or if it was a tenor, or he basically was able to carry the voice much further. He also would stand. The rabbi would usually sit. So the rabbis would sort of whisper into the Turgaman's ear what he wanted to say, and the Turgaman would say it. So now so we'll give an example. So basically, the rabbi does not say the name of his father or his rabbi. He would say literally my rabbi or my father, Avimori. He wouldn't he wouldn't say his father's name. But the Turgaman, the speaker, it's not his father, it's not his rabbi. So then he would say the actual name. The Gemara will give an example in a moment. So the Chacham Mishana Shem Av Shem Rabbi, he does not pronounce the name of his father or his rabbi. Turgaman Einim Mishana Leshem Aviv Leshem Rabbi. He doesn't change the name of the father or the rabbis. The Gemara says, Avur the man, whose father? Ilim Avur the Turgaman, Turgaman Lavar Chiyuvahu. If we're talking about the father of the Turgaman of the speaker, so then why is he permitted to say his father's name? We're talking about the rabbi's name. The Gemara gives an example. The son of Rav Ashi, he have a Dorish Perka. When he was giving the drash, what he would say is, Amr Abamari. So this is the son of Rav Ashi. He would say, the father that I fear, in reference to Rav Ashi. However, Ba'amore, the Turgaman, the speaker, he would say, Hachi Amr Rav Ashi. This is what Rav Ashi actually said, even though those weren't the specific words that was used by the son of Rav Ashi. He called him father. But the speaker, not bound by that limitation, he would just pronounce the actual name, which was Rav Ashi. Toner Rabbanim, the rabbis taught, Ezehu Meira ve'ezehu kibbutz. What is Meira and what is kibbutz? So Gemara says, Meira, what does it mean to fear, and what does it mean to honor? To fear means, you don't sit in his place. You don't stand in his place, you don't sit in his place. If you don't contradict him, nor is it appropriate to tell him that he was right. Kibbut, to honor him, how does that work? Michael, you feed him, umashke, you give him to drink, malbish, you give him clothing, umachasa, you cover him, machnis, umaitzi. You bring him in, you bring him out. It's basically service. And the Gemara says, Yibalahu, question. Mishami, the cost of feeding a person feeding his father, who bears that cost? Rabbi Yehudah says Mishal Ben, it's the son's obligation. Rabbi Nosson Maraisha Amar Mishal Av. Rabbi Nosson Maraisha says it's from the father. Rabbanon Lirav Yirmiyah. The rabbis said to Rav Yirmiyah, Ba'amillah, and some say Lebrei to Rav Yirmiyah, to the son of Rav Yirmiyah. 1 second. Only Lebrei Rav Yirmiyah. Okay, so the rabbis here ruled. The rabbis told Rav Yirmiyah. Some say the rabbis told the son of Rav Yirmiyah like the opinion that says that it's the obligation of the father. I believe this is the halacha as well. I believe we argue that halachically speaking, the father is obligated to incur the financial obligation of his honor. So you're not obligated to feed your father from your own money. You're obligated to feed your father, but it could be from his, but it could be from his money. Samar asks, Meisvei. By the way, just as a side point, if let's say he doesn't have any money, a person's primary obligation for tzedakah is his father. So before he gives tzedakah to anywhere else, he should be feeding his father. Then his family, etc., relatives come first before anything else. The verse states, honor your father and your mother, and honor God from your money. What do we see from there? Just like when you honor God, from what does it mean? It means it costs you money. There's a cost associated with serving God, right? We all bought an esrog. We honored God, bought him a nice esrog. Similarly, when you honor your father, it also has to be with an expense. 1 second. But if you say that the father is obligated to incur the financial obligation, the father sort of picks up the tab for his own for the cost of the service. Then how is it possible to spend money on your father? So the Gemara says, the father only has to pay for the actual cost of the foods, but the cost of preparing it, of bitul malacha, of losing work time, that is the son is obligated to pay for. Tashma, let's examine this. You have any of the following scenarios. You have two brothers, two partners, or a father and a son, a master and a student. So each one of these, two partners, the easiest to understand. Two partners, they presumably each one gives permission to the other one to redeem Ma'aser Sheni. And similarly, a father and a son, probably the same thing. However, they can each feed each other Ma'aser Ani. This is an interesting one. So we both own a field, right? The field yields 100 bushels. And each one of us gets 50. It's the time of year, it's the third or sixth year of the Shemitah cycle. So one of the tithes is Ma'aser Ani. We're talking about, I don't know, 8, roughly 8% is going to be going to Ma'aser Ani. So you take 8% to Ma'aser Ani. So what do we do? 8%, 8 bushels, 4 for each of us. So I take my 4 bushels and I give it to you, and you take your 4 bushels and give it to me, because you're poor and I'm poor. So we sort of make a deal. We exchange it. Very simple. And this is true, by the way, of two brothers or a father and a son. 1 second. How could that be? If you say that the son is obligated to provide sustenance for the father financially, so he is paying his own obligation. His obligation to serve his father is being paid by Ma'aser Ani, and that's not permitted. So now, typically, if you have two partners, we both happen to be poor, so then we're both allowed to exchange Ma'aser Ani. There's nothing wrong with that. But over here, the son is obligated to support his father. So how could his father pay him, or how could he use his own Ma'aser Ani to support his father? That's effectively supporting himself, because he's obligated to support his father. So Gemara says, we're not talking, in other words, the obligation to support your father is sort of the basic necessities. You give him, I don't know, Triscuits and oil, I don't know, some beer bones foods, bread and butter. You want to give him cream cheese, right? That's extra. So the cream cheese, that could come from Ma'aser Sheni. So the Gemara says, okay. The Gemara says, hold on a second. We have a problem here. Because if that's the interpretation of Yehudah says, Yehudah says a fire should consume that the man who supports his father with Ma'aser Ani. The ilhadofa might afkaminain. 1 second. We're not here. We're saying, according to the interpretation that we resolved, that actually the support of your father with Ma'aser Ani is only for the additions, not for the core things. So the bread and butter the son has to pay for. The cream cheese, that comes out of Ma'aser Ani. If that's the case, then what? Why does he get a penalty for using? Why is Rabbi Yehudah saying a fire should burn him if he's properly using Ma'aserani? What exactly is wrong? What did he do wrong? So Mara says, it's sort of embarrassing that you have to support your father for Ma'aserani. So therefore, Yehudah says, even though it's technically speaking permitted, it's not a recommended practice. Okay, Toshma. Let's try to prove this question. Who bears the financial responsibility for honoring the father? Shalos Rabbi Elazar. They asked the students asked Rabbi Elazar, Ad Heichen Kibbud Av V'Em. How far does the mitzvah of Kibbud Av V'Em go? And if you remember from yesterday, Rabbi Elazar was tremendously honored his mother. He let his mother literally step on him. She would step on him to get onto the beds. And his mother came to the study hall to tell everybody how great he was, and they weren't impressed. Why? Because they told him exactly this, which is a statement of Rabbi Elazar himself. How far does Kibbud Av V'Em go? If a parent would take a money belt, and right, this is filled with cash, the Yizrakenu Liam and the fun of Machlimai, and he or she would, one of the parents would throw it into the ocean, Machlimai, and they don't respond. 1 second. Hold on. How can they do the if you're not obligated to support the father, a person's not obligated to support his father. So then, who cares if his father throws the bag in the ocean? He'll make his father pay for it. So there's no financial loss here. So Gemara says, where he's able to inherit his father. So his father clearly has dementia. He's clearly, going to pass on in not the distant future, And right now he just wasted money. He took a bag full of money and threw it into the ocean. The other Rabbi Bar Huna, like similar to the story of Rabbi Bar Huna. The Rav Huna Kara Shiroi Ba'anpe Rabbi Bray. Rav Huna was ripping clothing in front of Rabbi, his son. Amar, he said, Ezel ichsi irosach ilay rosach. I want to see if he gets angry. So Gemara says, V'dilma rosach, maybe he'll get angry if he gets angry, then he's sort of seducing him into a sin, to dishonor his parents. So Gemara says, he forgave his own honor should his son lose himself. So the Gemara says, he's wasting. Why is he ripping clothing? He's taking a good item and he's ripping it. Just he could test his son. It's a waste. So the Gemara says, I'm not exactly sure what this is. I believe this is the edge of the garment. So sort of the seam, it's below the seam. So the seam is tied above the edges, and by ripping the below the seam, you don't actually damage anything. The garment is going to be perfectly fine. So there was no damage here. So the Gemara says, well, if he recognizes that there's no damage and there's no cost, maybe that's why he won't get angry. So the Gemara says, the Ovad le b'shas riskei. He ripped it while he was angry to see if Rava would respond. I'm sorry, to see if Rabba would respond. I guess presumably Rabba probably wouldn't notice that the fact that it's worthless. In other words, the fact that it's not a rip that's damaging isn't. If Rabba's going to respond, he's going to respond because his father got angry. Not so much because he's going to actually quantify what the amount of damages of his ripped clothing were. Okay, now we get into a complete side note, but basically the question here is, how do you correct your father? Your father makes a mistake, how do you correct him? Now, we take a significant detour to get there. So let's just, a little bit of background here. There's four methods of capital punishments. what's considered to be the least severe is decapitation or choking someone to death. Those are two methods that the court would use to kill people. They would literally cut somebody's head off. Or the other one was that the person would quite literally be choked to death, similar to hanging, not quite hanging, but similar. And then there are two more considered more severe, more painful deaths, which is burning, which doesn't actually mean they burn. They would pour molten lead down his throat, or stoning. Push him off a building and throw stones at him until he dies. The building was relatively speaking tall, but not that tall. I think it was 2 stories tall. Okay, now everyone agrees that chenek and hereg, decapitating and strangling, are less severe, less painful than stoning and burning. Obviously, burning again, not in the literal sense. The question now is, in each category, which is the more severe? Is stoning more severe than burning, or is burning more severe than stoning? And now we have the question. Masni la Rabbi Cheskel Rabbi Cheskel says to Rami, his son, Hanisrofim v'niskolam. So you had somebody who was guilty of a crime that required him, that the type of capital punishment he was going to get was burning. And he was put in a special cell in the prison. And anyway, they had a bunch of people that were supposed to be in death row to be stoned. And this person got intermingled, and we can't figure out who the guilty party is. It gets before the days of the pictures. They don't have a mugshot, and maybe the guy was sent from a distant place, right? So, in other words, to convict capital punishment, you need a court of 23. So he could have been convicted, in Tveria, and then sent down to Jerusalem to be executed. Although they could really execute him in Tveria too. But they don't have a mugshot attached to him, so they don't exactly know which is which. So one person to be burned is mixed with 30 people to be stoned. Reb Shimon says, Yedoine b'skila, he gets stoned. Shasrei fechamura, because burning is more severe. Amar Rav Yehudah Bray. So now the author of this brayso was Rav Cheskel. Rav Yehudah, the son of Rav Cheskel, tells his father, Lo tisnai hachi. Do not interpret the brayso. And now you can see where this is coming in. He's correcting his father. But we'll get to that in a moment. Let's first the Gemara will explain the brayso, and the Gemara will say that Rabbi Yehudah did not behave correctly here. It's not the way one should correct his father. Father, don't read the brayso this way. Why is that? Because my area is typically you have 30 people that are going to be stoned and one person to be burned. You stone him. Why do you stone him? Well, not necessarily. The fact that there are also 30 people to be burned. So you can also say that it's the law of Rav, of majority. Doesn't indicate to me. And then, in other words, the general principle that Reb Shimon is trying to say here is if you have 30 people to get a lighter penalty and one person to get a more stringent penalty, and they get confused, all the people get mixed up, you don't have the mugshots to be able to figure out who's who. So then everybody gets the less severe penalty. Even though typically the laws of Rav would tell you, give everybody the majority penalty, but in this scenario, everybody gets treated for the lighter penalty because we're not going to make a person who is less deserving of such pain to be executed in a more painful manner. Instead, everybody will get the lighter form of execution. So if that's the case, why are you giving me a scenario where the majority, according to Reb Shimon, burning is more severe? So why do you give me a scenario where the majority is stoning? It should be the opposite. The majority is to burn. One person is to stone. And that person gets mixed up in the other people. He gets intermingled. We don't know who's who. And the law is, even though the majority is a severe penalty, because there is a minority with a lighter penalty of stoning, so everybody stones. He says, my area is typically the main reason here is because the majority is to be stoned. So the Gemara says, this is the correct way to read the brayso. Haneskolam b'nisrofim. One guy to be stoned amongst many people to be burned. Okay. Amrlei. So Rabbi Yehudah says to him, I'm sorry. So Rabbi Cheskel says to his son, Ihachi, if that's the case, and Ema Seifa. Look at the end of the brayso. The rabbis say, Yadayna b'Sreifa shaskila chamura. Okay, you have a single stone guy mixed up with 30 people that are to be burned. The rabbis say burn him because stoning is less severe. So according to Reb Shimon, burning is less severe. According to the rabbis, stoning is less severe. So rabbis say burn him. My area, the skila chamura. Why do the rabbis need to give reasoning? Because stoning is more severe. Typically, the Ruben is in the reason could also be because the majority is to be burned. Same question in reverse. And the response is very simple. The point of this brayso is to tell you Reb Shimon. The rabbis argue with Reb Shimon. So that's why the rabbis, you're right, it is a less precise statement. It's the rabbis responding to Reb Shimon. They're saying, you're telling me Serefa Chamura, burning is more severe? No. Skila Chamura. Stoning. You're telling me that burning is more severe. I'm telling you that no, stoning is more severe. Okay. Anyway, so now this is Rabbi Yehudah talking to his father and correcting the record with his father. And here is where the problem, this is the problem. Amr le Shmuel Rabbi Yehudah. So Shmuel says to Rabbi Yehudah, shinin a sharp one. Le tema le la avuch hachi. Don't speak to your father this way. Tanya, we learned, his father was violating the laws of the Torah. You shouldn't say to him, Abba, my father, avart al divrei Torah, you violated the laws of the Torah. You should say to him, Kach kosa b'Torah, Kach kosa b'Torah. You should tell him that it's written in the Torah otherwise. Okay, now this is sort of a major problem here. So instead of telling him you're violating the Torah, you tell him it's written in the Torah otherwise. It's kind of the same thing. The Gemara says, "Sira kamitzar." You can also cause him pain. El Amrlai, you're right. El Amrlai, what you say to him is, "Abba mikra kosa b'Torah kach." You don't actually tell him that he's wrong. You just quote him the relevant citation, and he'll understand on his own that is incorrect. Elazar ben Masya Omer. Elazar ben Masya teaches the following law. Let's say Abba Omer Shkini Mayim. Your father asks you for a drink. Umitzvah lases, and there's a commandment to perform. Let's say, for example, somebody comes knocking on the door for tzedakah, for charity. It's a biblical obligation to give charity. So what do you do? It's a real right. This is a real scenario. You're sitting in the living room. Your father asks you for a drink, and someone knocks on the door for charity at that moment, exactly the same moment. And you know it's charity. I don't know. Maybe he calls out through the door. You know it's charity. Which one's more important? So he says, Lozar ben Masi says, "Meniach ani kavod Abba." You drop the honor of your father. V'oises a mitzvah, and you perform the mitzvah. Sha'ani v'Abba chayavim b'mitzvah, because both you and your father are obligated to follow God. So therefore, your father is also obligated to move aside his honor and honor God by giving the charity. Okay. Isa ben Yehudah says, "Efshar mitzvah le'altzai." If the mitzvah could be performed by somebody else, so let's say there's somebody else in the house, you tell him to go at the door and give the charity, and you go ahead and you pour your father a drink. Rav Masna says, "Halacha is ki Isi ben Yehudah." The halacha follows the opinion of Isi ben Yehudah. Okay, and now we get into the next discussion, which is the question of a father, and then we'll soon see a rabbi, and then a king, forgiving their honor. So Amar Bas Amar Chizda, Av Shemachal Kvaydei Kvaydei Machal. A father is permitted to forgive his honor. He can tell you, for example, not to stand up when he walks in the door. Harav Shemachal Kvaydei Ein Kvaydei Machal. However, a master that forgives his honor, or not a master, really a rabbi, he does not have the right to forgive his honor. For Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yosef says, "Afilu Rav Shemachal Kvaydei Kvaydei Machal." a rabbi who forgives his honor, his honor is forgiven. Shenemar, as the verse states, V'Hashem hoilech l'pneihem yomim. You'd think that the honor of God would be that the Jewish people should go before gods. We should go, and then the clouds of glory that represent God, and not represent, but really that are God's presence, should go behind us. Right? It's appropriate the student he's the entourage before the king comes. The king walks at the end of the entourage, right? You ever seen the motorcade, right? The presidential motorcade. I think there's 26 vehicles, of which about half of them go in front and half of them go in back. Which ones go in front? The ugliest ones, because it doesn't look good for the photo ops. So they have these the jamming stuff. They have these ambulances. The ugly vehicles all get sent first, and then you have the nice photo ops with all the the Suburbans and the Escalades, whatever it is. So it would be appropriate for the Jews to go first, then for God to come afterwards. But what does the verse say? No, the verse says when the Jewish people traveled, God forgave his own honor, and he went with the cloud of glory before us. He came before us. Imagine the king walking in without the entourage. The vehicles are all behind him. So you see that God can forgive his honor. Certainly a rabbi. Rava says, hold on a second. It's incomparable. God owns the world. He's able to forgive his honor. He can forgive his honor. We're on top of Lamed Beis, 32b. Torah dilehi is the Torah the possession of the rabbi. Why are you honoring the rabbi? Because of what he represents, the servant of God, the Torah that he has. But the Torah doesn't belong to him. It's God's Torah. How can you forgive somebody else's honor? You're not honoring him. You're honoring the Torah. And then Rava changed his mind and he said, "You're right. In Torah delay, it is called his own Torah. Why? The verse states, the Chsiv, as the verse states, Ubiterasai is a reference to his Torah, meaning the Torah belonging to the one who studies it. So it actually means that you do actually own the Torah that you learn. Yeah. And therefore, if you do own it, then yeah, Rava says it might be within your domain to forgive your own honor, for a rabbi to forgive his own honor. Gemara says, it's not the case. Okay. Probably best to summarize this outside because it's a little complicated. At least it was for me last night. Okay. Basically, okay. So now if a master would be able to forgive his own honor. So for example, let's say a master is making a party. Okay. He has a wedding. So the rabbi decides he's going to pour drinks for all the guests. Now that's quite an undignified thing to do. Mm-hmm. He's a bartender, effectively. It's not the most dignified thing to do for a rabbi to walk around pouring drinks for everybody. So this is clearly a rabbi who's forgiven his own honor, right? Mm-hmm. He's acting like a bartender, which is fine. He's a wedding. He's very excited. He wants to pour everyone drinks, which is perfectly fine. But he's clearly forgiving his own honor. So you would think that in such a situation, if he's forgiving his own honor, then maybe when he comes to you and offers you a drink, you don't have to stand up. He's coming to you. You're a student. We're all students, whatever. He's coming to all of us. Mm-hmm. And he's the great rabbi. You'll see the rabbi generation. He's like Reb Chaim Kanievsky, like the biggest rabbi of the generation. And Chaim, Shmuel Kamenetsky or something. He comes around pouring everyone drinks. If he comes to you pouring you a drink, you think that maybe you don't have to stand up for his honor because after all, he's coming to you to pour you a drink. Right. So the Gemara says, okay, but the problem was basically we'll see two stories where rabbis were pouring drinks at their kids' weddings, and then somebody didn't stand up for them and they were upset about it. So this clearly indicates to us that a master cannot forgive his honor. Meaning, even if he's going around and pouring drinks, you're not allowed to, you can't just sit down, you have to stand up in his honor. And the resolution of the Gemara is that no, you don't actually have to stand up. Look, he's clearly acting like a bartender. He's clearly not demanding his own honor. However, it is important to acknowledge his honor. So this is something you'll see sometimes. It's sort of like a half standing. You'll see people go like this. They're not standing. If you're obligated to stand up all the way. But what was I going to say? But this suffices if a master is forgiving his honor, you still have to do an acknowledgement. and that's the middle. And that's sort of the back and forth of the Gemara. Okay, let's see it inside. Okay, Rava Mashki Behilula Debrei. Rava was pouring drinks at his son's wedding. He poured a cup for a papa and Rafuna. 1 second. Rafuna Brei Rav Yeshua, the Rafuna the son of Rav Yeshua. So when he came over to them to pour them a drink, they stood up for him. Rav Mori Rav Pinchas Brei Rav Chizda v'loy kamu mikamei. To Rav Mori and Rav Pinchas, son of Rav Chizda, and they did not stand up. Ikbid, he was upset about it. He said, "What do you mean? Why aren't you standing up?" But he says, "Hana Rabbanon v'Hana Lav Rabbanon." Hana Rabbanon Lav Rabbanon. Are some rabbis really rabbis, and other rabbis don't know they're not rabbis? Do they not know the law that if a big rabbi comes over to you, you have to stand up for him? In other words, he was upset that they didn't stand up. V'su, and moreover, Rav Papa Havamashki Behilula the Abba Mar Brei. Rav Papa was pouring drinks at the wedding of Abba Mar, his son. V'dolei Kollel Rav Yitzchak Brei Rav Yehudah. V'loi Kamei Kamei. He poured a glass to Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Yehudah, and he did not stand up. The Ikbid and Rav Papa was upset about that. So clearly here we have a rabbi who's clearly forgiving his honor, and yet they're demanding that their students honor them. What's going on? The Gemara says you're right. No, okay. So the Gemara is trying to prove that this is evidence to the fact that a rabbi cannot forgive his own honor, and even if he does forgive it, it isn't forgiven. You still must accord honor to him. And the Gemara says no, not necessarily. It would have been appropriate for them to acknowledge his presence by sort of a half of a standing, a dignified way of acknowledging that you're talking to the rabbi of the generation. Omer Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, even according to the opinion that says that a rabbi that forgives his honor is forgiven. You don't have to respect him. If a nasi, a prince, it's not really a prince, it's really the exilarch. So he's a quasi king, not really a king. If he forgives his honor, it's not forgiven. The Gemara asks, there's a story of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shua, they were drinking at the wedding of the son of Rabbi Gamliel. And Rabbi Gamliel was going around pouring drinks. He poured a cup to Rabbi Eliezer, and he did not accept the glass. And he gave it to Rabbi Shua, and Rabbi Shua accepted the glass. 1 second. It's interesting. Okay. Now, if you remember this interesting detail here, if you remember the famous story that we learned in Brachas, More is in Brachas, and the story happened 3 times. One again in Rosh Hashanah. There's three stories that happened. Rabbi Yeshua considered himself to be quasi on par with Rabbi Gamliel. And there were 3 famous instances where Rabbi Yeshua disagreed with Rabbi Gamliel, and a student told Rabbi Gamliel that Rabbi Yeshua disagrees with him. So Rabbi Gamliel asked the question in the lecture, and he said, "Does anybody disagree?" And nobody disagreed. So then he said, "Anyone who disagrees should stand up." He knew that Rabbi Yeshua clearly so Rabbi Yeshua stand up and said he disagreed, and he made Rabbi Yeshua stand throughout the rest of the lecture. And after 3 times he did this, the rabbis deemed that was disrespectful to Rabbi Yeshua, and therefore they removed Rabbi Gamliel from being the nasi, and they gave it to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. I presume that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is not Rabbi Eliezer, probably somebody else. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's name was Elazar, not Eliezer. Okay, so anyways, Rabbi Yeshua receives the cup. Rabbi Eliezer says to him, "Maza Yeshua anu yashir Gamliel Rabbi Aymin Mashkalenu." So he says to him, "What do you mean? How could it be? Rabbi Gamliel he's the nasi, and you're accepting a cup from him. It's not appropriate. You can't just take a drink from him, even if he's pouring it." Amrlei. So Rabbi Yeshua says, "Matzinu godol mimenu sheshimish." We find people that are even greater than him that serve their guests. Avraham, right? We'll get to it soon. Parshas Vayera. Avraham Avinu serves 3 random strangers. or at least three people that appear to be random strangers. Avram Godla Dorhaya, he was the greatest of the generation. Because of Alam, he takes his guests in and he serves them. The Shema Taimer, and maybe he'll say Kamalach Asharas Nidmalai, that he recognized they were angels, right? They were Michal and Gavriel and Fall. They appear to him as regular Arabs, Arabs in the not Muslims, Arabs in the collective sense. And if Rabbi Gamliel wants to pour us drinks, that's fine. Amr Lahem Rav Tzaddik, so Rav Tzaddik who declined the cup, he says it's a bad example. I can give you even a better example. What's the better example? Why are you ignoring God? God is the great creator of the world. And what does he do? He blows the wind. He raises up kings and he brings the dew and he causes the world to sprout. And he arranges sustenance in front of any person, in front of every person. So in other words, if God sort of sustains the world, you imagine that's sort of a humbling thing to do. He's God, he's master of the universe, and he still goes ahead and spends his time feeding us. So certainly Rabbi Gamliel should be able to get up and pour us drinks. Okay, so the Gemara says basically the resolution here is very clear that an exilarch can forgive his honor. He is able to forgive his honor. So it's not just a father, not just a rabbi, it's also an exilarch. And we will clarify again the statement of Rav Ashi. This is the statement of Rav Ashi. Even according to the opinion that says that an exilarch can forgive his own honor. Remember, the exilarch is a quasi-king. However, a king who forgives his honor is not forgiven. When the nation appoints a king, they appoint him to have the fear of the king upon them. And the king may not forgive the authority of his position. The authority that's vested within the king is not within the king's domain. He doesn't own his own authority. He represents an authority, and that authority may not be forgiven. He has no right to forgive his own stature. Okay, join us right on time.
Oh, okay. Back here. By the way, what do you think of that attack on the naval base?
We got later. We're just starting a new passage. We're on 32b.
Is that here? I think you're going to gin this thing up.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say. What I meant to say is you came at the perfect moment. We're just that's what I meant to say. We're just starting a new passage.
This won't be any precious bodily fluid section, will it?
I think you're pretty clear onto the rest of the Masechta.
Where is it?
32b.
Say what?
32b. About 8 to 10 lines above the wide lines. Tanur bottom.
Yes, sir. 32b. Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, so now we sort of transition here and we'll discuss a little bit today and leave a lot of it for tomorrow. Let's really read the verses outside. If you have a fancy Gemara and you're on the page, you can look at the entire verse. It's the letter Daled. There's sort of three main statements there. The first one is in front of a seva. Seva sort of translates as an older person, an elderly person. But we'll have to understand, we'll have to get to the specific translation as we go through the Gemara. So the first is Mipnei Seva Takum, in front of an elderly person, Takum, stand up. Second thing is the Hadarta Hidur, provide honor to in a certain sense. It's really to to provide grandeur. Pnei Zokin, the face, literally the presence of a Zokin. Zokin is a person who's old. Okay, and the third part of the verse is V'yaresa me'alekecha ani Hashem.
and you should fear God. You should fear your God. Ani Hashem, I am God. Okay, so let's understand what exactly does this mean. Tana Rabbanim. If Bnei Seva talk in front of an older person, you should get up. Yachol, I would think afilu bnei zaken ashmai, even from an older person who is a sinner. Ashmai means a sinner. Specifically, it's not just a regular old person. It means an older person who is a sinner.
A funny word here, iniquitous.
Iniquitous.
Is what they use.
Yeah.
I never heard that.
Talmud Leimer zaken. So the verse states zaken. Ve'ein zaken el chacham. When the Torah words zaken is not just a reference to an older person, but it's a reference to an older person who is wise. Shenemar, as the verse states, asfali shiv. By the way, don't draw any conclusions until we finish this. We're not going to finish this until tomorrow. Asfali shivim ish miziknei Yisrael. Gather me together 70 people from the elders of the Jewish people, and the verse continues. Kihem ziknei ha'am v'chaytrav. These are not just the elders, but they're also the judges. So clearly, these were not just elderly people; they were also scholars. Rav Yosi Haglili Omer. Rav Yosi says, "Ein zikna elami shekana chachma." Rav Yosi says, "A zaken is somebody who has acquired wisdom." Okay, according to Rav Yosi, the word zaken is sort of a quasi abbreviation. It's zeh shekana chachma. Doesn't exactly fit. It's not a perfect mnemonic. Rashi explains sort of a quasi mnemonic. Okay, Shenemar is the first states. Hashem Kanani Reishis Darka. The 1 second. Sort of the beginning of wisdom is the ways of gods, and that is a reference to wisdom. That's what determines if a person is considered an older person or not. I would think that he stands before him from a distance. 168. No, stop here. What? Stop here.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll have to invite you up to the room.